Hello, everyone. Glad you can join us tonight. Got us a show. We're going to be talking about uh, whether the Delphi was either a random attack or a targeted attack. So, had been having quite a few questions sent to me, emailed to me, and asking more about the targeting and what my thoughts were on that. So, that's why we want to address that tonight. And as always, a little bit of housekeeping. Just respect each other in chat. No initials, no names of any type of persons that you may have persons of interest or suspects. Respect the moderators, and everything will go along smoothly, and we'll have a good show tonight. And looking forward to the comment section, especially tonight. Anticipate quite a few. But with that being said, we'll get started. All right. As always, we do a little brief introduction. This is Mrs. Steve, and I'm Steve. I'm a retired law enforcement, 20 years of service. Started off working in the jail, worked road, and eventually went into investigations. During my 20 years of service, I worked and was trained in all different types of law enforcement, from SWAT all the way through to becoming a state certified crime scene tech, which helped my investigative career immensely. But I investigated everything from burglaries all the way up to homicides. After I retired, became aware of the web sleuth and the true crime world, and decided that in seeing some of the issues in there between some people wanting to have an impact, I wanted to share what law enforcement training has shown me and how law enforcement thinks, and I tried to become an ambassador to the web sleuth world, so that as we progress forward and as the departments and law enforcement across the country start using and becoming aware of all the ways that they can use the true crime world and social media. Some departments do it quite effectively, some not so much yet, but we need to work on those so that everybody has an understanding of how we can assist and how we can work together and have a great impact. But tonight we're going to be talking about, we've got some stats stuff, which stats absolutely just, I'm not going to waste a bunch of time on what the FBI crime tables and the stats show and everything. I brought up a few, I think there's like 3 or 4 slides here, specifically talking about Indiana and the murder, and which on the tables they have a lot of information on there. But since we're looking at the Delphi murders and concentrating on Libby and Abby's murder, that we have to look at in the larger sense of what was the murder rate within the state of Indiana, and how likely were they going to be the victims of such a homicide. And in the homicide continuum of low risk victims all the way up to high risk victims, where were they at on that scale? And law enforcement uses a scale that begins at one end of what type of person and how likely they are to be a victim of a crime. And it has a lot to do with where you may live in a state. Are you in a metropolitan area? Are you in a rural part of the state? And what are the risk factors that you have regardless of where you live? What type of job do you have? What's the crime rate in that specific area? How often? And what's drug issues? And there's just so many things that go into it. Are you a high risk victim as far as your way of life, style of life? Are you placing yourself in harm's way where you meet a lot of strangers and certain places that are high risk, whereas you could be a victim? Or if you're one of those persons that you're very sheltered, low risk, only time you're out of the house is either at your job or going shopping or something. And so there's a continuum there that people are assessed on, and it shows you and evaluates you at how likely you might be a victim of a homicide. And for Indiana in 2017 and 2018, rate per thousand was in 2017, 6.2 out of 100,000. So 6 people out of 100,000 were at risk in Indiana in 2017 of being murdered. And that would probably, that's just the average overall across the state. Whereas in some of the rural areas, it would be lower versus what the metropolitans are. Because you can see here on the table 5 that in the metropolitan area, 363 murders that occurred in 2018. Outside the metropolitan area, there was only, let's see on this one here, it says actually reporting, but estimated was 26. So it's only like 15% chance, 80% of all these crimes or 85% of all these crimes occurred in the metropolitan areas. Out in the rural areas, it's very low percentage rate of and odds of being a victim of a murder. And that's what these tables can do. But once again, you make tables almost say anything when you're talking about statistics. And and as what occurred with the homicide of Olivia Nabby, it was a tragedy no one saw coming. And as we go and we look at what I've said, and when we talk about him, it's something they never experienced there. And this is an expanded homicide data figure table, pie. You can go in here and look at it, and it has everything from the little over 12% family that if of homicides that did occur, what percentage was by family of the known homicide, how many were by strangers of the known, and then the large percentage of it that's known, that when you add all those numbers together, while there is a likelihood of the solved cases and the unknown, because the unknown cases, they don't know what persons were involved, what happened, was it targeted, was it random? They have no idea. But on the ones that they did solve, they're able to bring and create this pie to tell you what the percentages are. But it's just like I said, you can look at these things, you can make them say anything, and people draw certain conclusions of just because it's unknown that it's this type of person or it's this person. And that's not ever the case. You have to go through that victimology. You have to understand that victim, what was going on in their lives, where they were at on that risk continuum of being a victim. And then you have to determine, and if you can determine what type of motive or the motivation for the murder is, it narrows the field of who the suspects would be, and investigations would make best use of that. And so, like I said, the statistic parts of it, I just wanted to give a brief overview of it. You can go in there and look at the FBI crime stats and study them all day and educate yourself on them. And if that's brings some revelations to you, absolutely use them to the best of your abilities. See what you think, because you may be working on certain POIs in certain areas on different types of crimes in different areas. And these tables are across the country. It's just not for Indiana. And so make use of those. Also looked at the homicide table 8, and it tells you what type of weapons or instruments were used in homicides. And by far, most people are victims of homicide by firearms. But the second most likely one is knives or cutting instruments or edged weapons of any type. And so once you get through the gun part, and there's nothing saying that that just because someone dies of a knife injury doesn't mean that a part of the crime couldn't have been committed with the threat of a firearm to gain control. Those stats aren't in here. These stats are that you died, a cause of death was by this type of instrument. They didn't include, which I wish they would, about how often someone may gain control of the individual in different manners. It may be out there. I've just never seen it, which I find extremely interesting for the fact that it takes a different type of, you're looking at organized killer. When you have someone that has the ability to gain control through whatever ruse or ever threat of type of weapon they might bring to a scene, and then go to another method of and manner of death. That's a more organized type of offender, and which brings to the table because it's hard for one individual to control two victims unless you have some type of weapon that you can bring that puts fear and has that controlling effect on them instantly. And there's not much that has more controlling on individuals as we see in movies and everything, that we're constantly trained to fear those firearms and that you do what you're told. And does it overcome some of the fight or flight that we have as instincts in our human nature? Yes, people fear that firearm. People fear the knives, but everyone fears that firearm because you can't outrun it, and we see it all the time, and we're almost preconditioned to fear that gun. In law enforcement, it's not, we're trained constantly to react when there's a firearm being presented, that we don't freeze. We go ahead and do what we have to do to preserve life and protect ourselves and others. And but the general population doesn't have that training, and so they will act across the board. There's sometimes that you can go out there and you can watch a lot of this stuff in these videos, especially people that had military training, that when they're threatened with a firearm, they act appropriately, defend themselves instantly, either by disarming or bring another firearm to play. And it's just one of those things and stats that you can see on these tables and stuff about what weapons are used and how often they're used. We get to now we get into the aspects of, was it a random crime or was it a targeted crime? And Mr. Ives here, who was the prosecuting attorney for the in the area at that time of when this crime occurred, and he makes statements that in his interview, if you go back and watch it, that Jerry Ingard Giola, I'm so sorry if I butcher your name. We're going to call you Jerry. They should bring back the fire squad for anyone who victimizes a child. I've never believed these freaks can be rehabilitated. Big Steve, you're a good guy in a world filled with evil. Thank you. That's very nice of you. And you are absolutely correct. Me and you need to sit down and have a cup of coffee. We have a lot in common because people that target these children, the most vulnerable, I mean, what type of animal, what type of psychopath are they? And we shouldn't allow them to ever have the opportunity to repeat such a crime when we find them. But like I said, Mr. Ives here, when he was speaking of this, if you watch his interview, he says that they had never experienced such a crime that in his career while he was there. And most agencies haven't. When you have two young children, innocent children, just out enjoying a beautiful day, and then such a tragedy occurs and such a horrific crime, that most communities have no idea, and it just brings such terror to a community, which what it did to here. And so when you see him speaking in in his interview, he brings up that he had no information. Now that doesn't mean that whichever part of the investigation, and when he was brought in early on into the investigation, which he's speaking about early on, this is pre a lot of the information that we have now. But when he's speaking of that, he said they had no logical reason for anyone to know the girls would be there that day, which is, if you read it, that he's not aware that anyone knew they were coming, that they lured there, that seems unlikely to me. So all those statements, and even where the statement says, I do not believe it was a planned crime, shows that he didn't know of the information of the transcripts. Although he says that he, in his interview, that he was in charge of gathering and participating and obtaining search warrants, which early on, within a few weeks of the homicide, there was a search warrant in at the Klein residence where those transcripts came out of, and where that information came out of about someone that did know and had communicated with day of and had made a statement that I was supposed to have met with them. They didn't show up. And so was he aware of that information and just forgot it? Or was he never privy to that information? We don't know. I'd like to see another interview of him currently and see what, if any of his stances or opinions have changed recently. It may be out there. If anybody has any links to any more recent interviews of him, most certainly let me know. But then we go to the other side of law enforcement, and this was within a week. I think this is on the 22nd or 23rd of February. So you're just looking, less than 10 days after the homicide of Libby and Abby. And this public information officer, he says one of two things happened. He says either it was a chance encounter, and he says, I don't think it's likely, speaking that it's a chance encounter. And then he said, number two, that person knew they were going to be there, and he was going along that route. What information or what did he see or what information had been relayed to him from what investigator that had seen the crime scene, had evaluated and had come to that opinion and spoke to him in their staff meetings? Because in law enforcement, these meetings occur. Everybody, that's involved in a homicide investigation, as certain duties are sent out and certain things are occurring, and certain themes and possibilities and avenues of investigations moving forward are determined, you weigh and you evaluate that information. And from the mannerisms, and when you watch his statement and you listen to his statement, and he says one chance encounter he doesn't think is likely, then that means that they knew they were going to be there, which leads you along as random or targeted. Whereas if you went by his opinion of it, it's a random crime. Mr. Ives absolutely said no one he thought of, he don't believe it was planned, and no one knew they were going to be there. So if you go with his thought process, it's random. If you go with his process, it's targeted. And so you have to go from there. We got 1 and 1. And as we've watched the case evolve over the years, and a new direction occurred in 2019 in which way it was going and how it was going and where it went, and the new information from the transcripts and the questions that were asked, the targeting of those questions, because the interviews and transcripts were, like I said, they're always goal oriented. Law enforcement doesn't just decide at some point that I don't have anything to do today, I'm just going to go get somebody out of a jail cell and talk to them for a while. That isn't what happens. That when you're working a case, you build a interview questionnaire of what is the ultimate goal of that interview, and you go in there and you work towards that goal to get that one question answered that you want. Somewhere usually towards the later half of the interview is when they come after you, and if you're looking at a 200-page transcript, you go look in those last 50 pages, and that's going to tell you what they're looking for, and of those key questions at that point of who is assisting you, or who did you talk to, or where were you at, and what was going on. And that's going to tell you what they was wanting, because all the other is just building a questionnaire and building and getting your mind occupied so that they can see how you respond, and possibly link certain information in there you might let slip. But then we get to this, when this public information officer came out, I think it was in December of 2021. I know it was in 2021, but I think it was December when this ISP officer came out. And if you watch his interview or his news briefing and his call to the public and asking people that if you had contact with the Anthony shots, and those news briefings and news releases and these calls to action and wanting the public's help is goal-oriented also. And you have to look at some of the questions that he wanted. And when you see this interview, he starts off with that due to the investigation of the Libby and Abby homicides, he's very clear. This is related to the Libby and Abby homicide. It's not the CSAM. It's not just to the Anthony shots account. It's the Libby and Abby's homicide. And so when you weigh those and put those together, the Anthony shots issue, that there's a clear indication it's not CSAM that they want them to follow up on. They're looking for this information here. When you communicated, how you communicated, what social media platforms you used, and did Anthony shots, most critically, meet you or try to meet you? And did he obtain your address? But the biggest question of these 5 questions is, did he try to meet you? And when you put that along with the Anthony shots, that not only was Anthony shots targeting these young children for the CSAM materials, he also was targeting for their addresses and trying to have attempts to meet with you. And when you try to meet people, and you've also have tried to obtain nude photos or lewd or requested lewd acts, then, you know, when you target that age group, and, you know, as Anthony Shots did, and we know who created the Anthony Shots case and why. Because when you look at the catfishing, and what is catfishing? It simply is a deceptive activity where a person creates a fictional persona or fake identity on a social networking service, usually targeting a specific victim. And we know that occurred. There's no ifs, ands, or buts that we have a victim of a homicide with a person who communicated with them on a day of their death that had targeted them for the CSAM material, the nude. And because when you listen to and you see Kagan speaking about it, he said he never talked to a girl in his life that he didn't want a nude picture of. And so, you know, when you look at that type of individual and that evilness, then you know why he's targeting them. Now, how far and other people might be involved in this, and that was part of the reasons that when you look at the transcripts, it's more than one person that was using that Anthony Shots profile. And so that's where it gets, you know, a little bit foggy and unclear of who and all were involved in the catfishing and getting those materials. But as Kagan admitted that, you know, he's the one that created this account, and he's the one that communicated with these juveniles, and he did it to solicit the nude images, get their addresses, and attempt to meet them. And this is what the profile was created for. And so then when you have this targeting, and, you know, when I first looked at this case and started doing the victimology, and then I did motive and motivations, we didn't have all the, you know, some of the information. We had a lot of the information. And I wasn't really clear if it was random or if it was targeted. Going back and looking at and knowing the knowledge that we have now from everything with the transcripts all the way and reading them, becoming more familiar with them, and seeing some of the advances and the searches that are going on, I feel far more confident that, yes, that we are looking at the children that were targeted, and they were targeted that day. It's just not a random act, in my opinion. Now, there's still going to be a lot of people that argue that it is a random offender. I'm going along more towards that it's targeted now, and that it had been targeted for more than just those last few moments and where that first encounter occurred. I think that just like law enforcement, at least the public information officer in February of 2017, in that first interview, he believed that they were targeted, that he did not think it was just a random chance encounter. Is he mistaken? Am I mistaken? That's a possibility. But when you start piling everything on and you look at this individual here, Kegan Kline, and what part did he play? He played most certainly a part for the fact he's the one that created them, targeted them originally. And how much of the other part and who was all involved in it, that's going to be determined. And because all the way up from the early part, they said it had nothing to do with social media. 2019, they flipped the board and they said, yes, it does have. And then in 2020, we get Kegan Kline. Then in 2021, we get the Anthony Shots account with even more. And that they're continuing along this investigative track. And so it's all indicators that they believe, in my opinion, the ISP absolutely believes that they were targeted. It's not a random act, for the fact that, you go from 2019 when they changed and to 2020 when they arrested him and then did the interview, and then you do the 2021 when the other information of the other public information officer comes out requesting, and you have the yellow or the UBO information comes out on that other platform. But, this person here, we've talked about him a lot over the months that we've been looking at him. I'm still relatively new to this case. Been looking at it about 4 months now. Cherie, hey, thank you for Charlie 883. Thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate all y'all's support. It means a lot to us. And but there's, if you think out of all the random victims and all the people that he catfished over the years, that on the homicide of these two victims, and he left the state after their homicide, and while he's out of state, and he doesn't even live in the same county where these victims are from, but he's so focused on their case that he does certain things. He searches DNA evidence on bodies, does numerous searches of the Delphi murders. And this man here lives 36 miles away. He lives in a totally separate county of that, and he has left the state. So how often was it going to be in the news, and how familiar? And he also is one that had the account that was created by him that communicated them with the morning of, communicated with them after that they were supposed to meet. And he's the one that catfished Libby, and we know why he catfished Libby originally, for the fact that, like I said, there was never a female he spoke to that he did not try to get those images. And then this, of course, is one of my shows that we created in this targeting board of all the things that this man did for after he had and while he was under this cloud of suspicions. The text messages, the Anthony Shots account, the DNA, the numerous searches, and communications even after he knew of their murder, catfishing. And so everything points to that he targeted them for catfishing. And then it's up to question, did he also set up the meeting that led to their possible demise and the homicide of Libby and Abby? And what part did he play in that? And that's the real big question. And I know, and in my opinion, I believe he did play a part in it. And hopefully with the search that has ended, that we'll get information that will bring closure to this case. And how long will that take? Hopefully not, another 5 years. Crime labs, of course, are, extremely busy. They work more than just one case. They work more on just one homicide. But when you have a high profile case, they will, adjust things and try to get that information out as soon as possible. Hopefully they have found something that will either match something that caused injuries at the crime scene, or they'll find something that was used for communications or some type of device that might have captured some images. What they're looking for and what they found in that river, we don't know. We do know that it has ended after 5 weeks of them being in it. And so hopefully it has come to a closure, and hopefully we're moving forward. But if you have any information on this and you're on the fence and you don't know if your information means anything, call law enforcement. Let them know, let them evaluate, let them decide. Because at the end of the day, that's all that matters, is that what law enforcement can use and do with the information that you have. But anyway, we'll get to the questions now.
All right. And number one, why I agree with you. Georgia better wake up. I'm getting angry sitting here. They're losing 10-0.
Oh, Georgia Bulldogs.
I am not happy.
I thought somebody was in chat named Georgia.
No. All right. So there's a bunch here. Some of them are just statements. Some of them are questions.
Sure.
I've got 53 starred.
Okay.
All right. Here we go. This is William. I'm at the point where I have no clue who Bridge Guy is. The video is really blurry too. See his face close up.
Okay.
What?
It didn't highlight.
Oh, it didn't show. There you go. There it is.
And yes, that is one of the biggest questions out there. And so much has been put on that blurry image. And even Carter said that look at the image from the neck down. And I wish, as Carter says, that he'd rather have that data and that video than not have it. And I agree. But I do wish they released the whole video. Carly. Thank you, Carly, for becoming a member. Absolutely.
Thank you, Carly.
We thank everybody that supports this channel in so many different ways. And most certainly with the memberships too, that helps us go a long ways as we start to do our trip in a couple of weeks. And I will be having another members video this week. Might be even tomorrow, I'm thinking about. So most certainly check us out on the, because as I move forward and plan for our trip into the Midwest, which is mostly to work on some cold cases for family. But I have put aside a day or so that I can visit the Delphi area and get some answers for that have been relayed to me, to get answers for that questions that people don't have, and things that I don't understand, and I won't understand until I'm boots on the ground there and look at it and give you my opinion, looking at it from my law enforcement training and understanding of what I believe that crime scene can tell us.
And Molly, I live in a large metro area. Yeah, high crime rate, but kind of depends on what part of town you live in, work in, etc. Like most large metro areas.
It is. And, but the closer you are to those metro areas and the more crossing of paths that you can be a victim, and the further out you're away from those high crime areas, the less likely you are to be to those predators. But there's predators everywhere.
All right. And Shane said 15% seems like 1,000,000 to 1 shot to me. And that was on your slide with the pie chart.
Oh, yeah. And, it is. I mean, we see hundreds of people a day, and we see thousands of people in a month or two. And, how many of those people die of homicides? Very, very few.
Okay. Boston Christian, I walk all the time on different trails and in parks. Does that now increase my risk of an attack?
I would say yes, it does. How much percentage point? It's probably a small percentage point. Depends what type of park it is, what type, is it in New York City? What are the hours? Is it in a high crime, near high crime drug areas? Juliet, thank you both for all your time you give for others. Thank you so much for that. That means a lot to us, and we're trying to do as much as we can, have a big impact as we can, and people like you that support us in all these ways, our members, that's what it's for. Thank you. But as you know, it's situational awareness, and do you walk by yourself or do you walk with groups? Even within that continuum of how often that you might put yourself at risk on those same trails, if you put yourself out there on that trail at a high time or high risk time of whereas you're the only one in that park late at night and there's drug activities within that park late at night, then you are most certainly increasing your odds in just that one park. But it's all common sense, situational awareness, and be careful out there when you walk, and walk in groups and in safe time periods.
And double rainbows, LE might know who it is. Proving it is the issue.
You're exactly right. Double rainbows. I've known, and like I say, it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And I've been there, and it just drives you crazy as a law enforcement officer that you know who did it, you know how they did it, but you can't prove because you don't have the evidence to prove that they did it. And it's more than just a gut instinct. I mean, but sometimes, and you'll have it that you even have what you believe is enough proof to charge someone as a law enforcement officer, but that isn't always your, you go to a DA and they say, no, we're not going to charge them. We don't have enough evidence to get a conviction. We're not going to waste the time on that. And so even law enforcement officers at some time, we're put behind the eight ball that we don't get a chance, even with the evidence, and we think it's enough. But sometimes the prosecuting attorneys don't think it's enough, or they'll go in there to a grand jury and they just don't think it's enough, and you won't get the charges.
In digital, Steve, do you think if LE needed tips from the general public at this point in the investigation, they would release more or do a media drop to ask specific questions?
And that's an interesting perspective, that if they're not asking and they're doing all this searches and they're doing all this other stuff, that why aren't they asking other than, we just need that one tip, or we need that one piece now, which I find interesting that a lot of the information, and when you see these recent videos, that they mention that more, that we need one piece, and they were looking in the river for evidence. Is that one piece changed from that one tip? But that is an interesting perspective that you have, that they haven't been asking for a lot of public input more recently. And so I'm going to have to look at that. Thank you.
And William, does anybody know at this point who Bridge Guy is? Wonder if law enforcement even knows at this point.
With some of the information that's been released and some of the stuff, that it's possible, and is it likely? We don't know. It may be that case of it's not what you know, it's what you can prove. And hopefully law enforcement, if they do have a person that they know it is, hopefully they will try to minimize any damage that could come from such that knowledge, and have them under surveillance so that they won't be able to create any type of havoc or harm anyone.
And James, motive is the key, mostly.
It is. It's not always, necessary for a conviction, but it most certainly is something that law enforcement likes to have.
And why? Hard to believe anyone would want to hurt young children.
There's some animals out there, these psychopaths and, sociopaths. I mean, they just don't care. They're just animals. And I have no use for them. And as most people, good citizens, don't.
And Mindy, I would never walk alone on trails and parks anymore.
I agree with you. Never
And
alone. And
a
not
friend of mine
Mhm.
was approached in a Walmart parking lot.
last week, scary time.
Yes.
And, just in groups of two, that may not be, you may be needing to be in larger groups. So, just don't think that because you and one other are together that you're safe. Um, team up as large as you can.
And Gary, I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the interrogation/interview with Keegan? How would you have approached the interview?
The whatever the behavioral science part played in it, and what was the goal of it. I looked at that interview and saw it, and everything looks good. The problem with reading a transcript doesn't show you the interactions, the time lapse between answers and questions, the posturing of the of Kagan. What cues were he giving her certain questions? What was he doing? Where was he looking? How defensive was he? Was he trying to, create space on certain questions? There's so much more to an interview other than just the words. Now, the words are very powerful. The questions are very powerful. The answers are. But we don't know when you're just trying to read it. You don't have that time frame. You don't have those interactions. Do I think that they've got information that they needed? Yes, I think they got a lot of information because they went in there. They knew what the truth was and what the lies were, and what was interactions. And did sometimes they just want him to lie? Because when you go to court, sometimes those lies, you've got it on there now that either he lied in the interview or he's lying in front of that jury, and it's powerful. So just catching people in lies sometimes is all it takes.
And Honey Bee, it seems like people in our society lack restraint now. I don't think it was like this 30 years ago. I know it wasn't.
I don't know. I met some crazy people back then also. Is it to this level? And as technology changes and criminals change, have we evolved? There's always been people out there that preyed upon children. It's just now everything is so visible and so quickly that just a small piece of news can go, just fly viral and be everywhere in minutes. So that's played a great part in it.
And William, at Steve. Steve, do you think law enforcement has a good idea who Bridge Guy is and they're getting close to finally making an arrest?
I absolutely hope so. And hopefully they have, game owner surveillance or have him in jail. I don't know, but we can only hope.
And Susan, is staging considered a signature?
No, there's a little bit of differences in signatures and some staging. Staging is generally a lot of times is that you're trying to drive the investigators away from a set understanding of the crime scene. That you have a offender that says, well, if I don't point it towards some other direction, they're going to see that I'm the killer or I'm the offender. And staging occurs in everything from burglaries. I've been there where people have staged burglaries and they stand inside the house and break the window from the inside out, which is about as dumb a thing as you can do. And and so the staging, the signatures are something that is additional that doesn't have to be part of that crime. That is that calling card says, this is me. I did this. And it plays a large part of what their fantasy is, that they're driven to do that signature. So there's differences in the staging and signatures.
And Molly, Self-defense classes are available, low cost in most areas. They can teach you a lot and also how to defend yourself with things you would have with you, car keys, etc.
Firearms,
Right.
or firearms, or anything, you know, pepper spray. There's so many things out there that are available to you now that's less lethal, or, you know, it just depends on where and what your feelings are of how you want to protect yourself.
And Mindy, my friend and I used to pack picnic lunches and go deep into the woods and sit on a bridge and eat. Thinking about this now gives me the creeps.
It is, because you don't know how often you might have been looked at as potential victims.
William, the Delphi murders were definitely not random, in my opinion.
Yeah, when early on, I wasn't so sure. I'm more towards you, absolutely now.
All right, so now we've got some randoms.
Okay. All right.
So Shane, number 2 is assert.
Certainly, I guess.
Yeah. All right. So honeybee, not random.
Okay.
All right.
So we got
Mindy, not random.
All right. So we're at 3.
You're at 3 not randoms.
All right. I'm gonna keep a poll here. We got a running poll.
There you go. And Molly at True Crime Web. When did Ives make the statement that it was random pre-2019, and he has changed his mind publicly about that? Do you know?
I don't know if he has. That's how come I was asking. Is anybody saying it? And I don't know the exact release date of his of that interview. I watched it, or part of it, just a couple of days ago when I was doing this, and I just didn't write down the date of it. But I will check on that.
All right. And SB 74, whoever decided to do the nationwide billboards thought it was random, I guess.
Yes, and that's one of the things that FBI did, or what that they used that money for that. And did law enforcement do that for a purpose? Was that part of, or one of their strategies? Yes. And could they be right? Absolutely. But the way that ISP is addressing it is that it's not, that it's more targeted. And, you know, you had, even within the FBI, you had, whereas these billboards across the country would be indicative, and you're absolutely correct, that it would be a random, almost serial killer type of offense. But you also had within that same organization that not only assisted in the billboards, but you had them that identified the Ron Logan as a suspect and did the affidavit of that this is the individual. So there's mixed information even within that one organization, and which happens. I mean, that's just part of the investigation. You're going to have investigators going one way, and you, to this day, I'm sure that within the ISP and within the Carroll County and Delphi and all these agencies that assisted, that you're still going to have people that will debate that. And that's what you have to do, because you can't ever be absolutely closed mind. You still have, and I still have my mind open, but I'm going further along the way that they were targeted than more now than ever, so that they were targeted versus random.
All right. And if y'all could drop over there and hit us a like button, we certainly would appreciate it.
Yes, that's one way to support, and it helps us so much as far as the way YouTube works, because YouTube on the things that they do and the ads and stuff, and as people go back, because I have a group evidently, which I most certainly appreciate, of my viewers that go in there and watch my ads, for the fact that helps support my channel. And, you know, watch them, go get a cup of coffee and then enjoy and watch, and hopefully I can educate and bring awareness to this case. But it's just, like I say, I appreciate everybody that supports us in any way you can.
All right. And Shane, I've also said it had nothing to do with online activities. He was wrong, in my opinion.
Well, like I said, they went 180 from that. And when Carter, you know, we switched gears, and it shocked the whole communities.
All right. CJK, I always thought an interview would be part of what is known and part bluff to draw out info.
And some investigators do that. Some investigators, they'll go in there and they'll gamble. And I've seen them get burned on it. I hated to be part of some of those, because if you go in there and you bluff the wrong individual and you say the wrong word, they know if you misstate something, because they were there, they know what went on at that crime scene, and they know what they did. And you may not know they had a partner, and it may be the partner that did that part, and you're telling this individual he did it, and he knows he didn't do it, and they may realize that you know nothing. And so I was always against the bluffs.
And Joan, thank you so much for all your hard work, Mr. and Miss Steve. I wonder if you would consider interviewing Mr. Ives. Because of your LA background, he may be open to it. Back to the start.
That is a good point. I've got some things to do. Hopefully, I do have time. I've got some things to do. I've got these other victims I'm going to be working on. But like I said, I've tried to put some time, and if everything works out well and I can stay tight to my schedule, I'll be able to do some things around Delphi, and I'm looking forward to that.
Charlie, targeted.
Yeah. So we're seeing a strong.
All right. And Janet, my husband thinks the reason why he was taken to Grissom Air Force Base for the interview and not the state police post is because he wants to go into witness protection for his testimony.
And all that stuff is, I'm sure that if that is the case, which I have no idea, don't know, don't even know how one would get into the witness protection. That, that's all Fed stuff. That's not something that local would have anything to do with.
Okay, you may never get out of here tonight. All right.
We'll do whatever we got to do.
Sees through. I would have sided with it being a targeted kill, but it makes no sense to me to park at CPS building and crossing the creek. Huge barrier, increasing risk of escape. Clients don't know area.
And I mean, I don't know. And with the internet now, how easy it to pull up and looking at maps of trails, I have no idea. And, everybody has to weigh this information and argue their points. And most certainly like this, I respect your opinion, and you have a right to it, for the fact it doesn't make a lot of sense to park in one area, the furthest point away from the ambush abduction site. Were there other areas and accesses that you could have got to that? Yes. And that is a good point that you brought up.
And Molly, when the ISP officer did the briefing from your slide, that was released late at night to YouTube, I believe. It was a filmed video, not a presser. Any thoughts?
Yeah, there's been a lot of debate about why would you pick that time slot, and it is a good point. Was there an individual that normally did a certain act watch TV or watch YouTube at a certain time, and how much was that chance, and how much was it targeting a certain audience? We don't know.
And why do many people get sick at the crime scene after committing such brutal murders? Thank you. I know I would.
I know of at least one. I wouldn't work in the case. It happened in a adjoining agency, but that's exactly how the offender was determined. He got sick after the crime, and they went in there and were able to retrieve carpet materials and get a DNA profile. And so sometimes that does occur.
Paper Chaser, do you think the reason Libby was more brutally attacked, as reports have implied, was because she was the original target or because she reacted more strongly to the confrontation by BG?
Either or. And speculating, I don't know for the fact that we don't have pictures of the crime. The CSI, the analysts on the scene, the investigators that saw it, they would have debated it and asked about it and saw it and looked at it, and they may have they would have a clearer understanding of it. But both of those could lead to more injuries, and unless you're there at the scene and be able to evaluate exactly what evidence is there, it could be either or both.
And Molly, did he obtain your address? In quotes, makes me think of Ski Mask Guy.
Yes, it is. That might be part of that.
And T-Bone, one thing I suggest is if Ellie has no idea who the POI is, Ellie should let the public know. This case is ludicrous at the least.
We're almost going on 6 years now, and the families, how many ups and downs have they had over the years, and how many more are they facing? It's absolutely tragic.
In April, even if this crime has a link to the AS account, it doesn't mean it's the client's, given others were said to be using the account.
You're correct. Yes. But that's where it's going to be determined. And then they have to determine how much what Kagan's involvement were. And if he has the information to give them of who else, either how did they get access to that account? And did he, how did he grant them access?
And sees through, what if Klein is just giving him up for CSAM?
Don't know. Is that part of the deal? Could be.
April, targeted.
Yes.
Put it on your list.
Oh, yeah. We're 5-1.
I agree, Steve. The Delphi murders were not random. And Molly, look here. The channel is at 2.75 now. Woo, woo. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's and that's humbling. We just started this, and I think another couple of weeks we'll be here for 5 months, and which is just absolutely amazing as we have a greater impact and as we move forward. Everything, it helps that, it gives us reassurance that we're trying to do and we're making progress, because we have, I don't know how many thousands of visitors that come to our Cyclops website and to our website to look at Cyclops. And so we have people that go in there and look at these missing children, which is very rewarding in and of itself. And we want to thank everybody that does that.
And I love this. T-Bone, targeted and planned to the T. Awesome.
It is.
Okay.
I like T-Bone.
I like that.
That's a good name, T-Bone.
And Avondale Mama, makes me think higher ups involved in some of these rings.
And it is, just because you may be of a different social economic class, that, there's still a lot of evilness out there across the board.
And Neil, climbs are neck deep in this. Sees through, why would they let him walk free for 3 years? Even if not a suspect, they had him on CSAM.
That is an argument I've hate, and I've seen where they do parallel investigations sometimes, that they'll continue and allow certain people out, and so that they can at some point, and you see it on pill mills too, that they'll run an investigation for 2 or 3 years while people's lives are destroyed on these pills. And that's, some of these agencies look at it as the cost of doing business. I just hate that type of mentality.
And Charlie, some sleuthers make a big deal about how long for LE to arrest KK after the 2017 raid. Steve, do you think LE had all of the CSAM data then? It must have taken longer to gather all that evidence, no?
I don't know. They served numerous search warrants and gathered that data. And when were they able to break and get in there and see all the evidence? Because I saw another YouTuber the other day of where someone went in and hacked the client account and found more information and notified the FBI, and which they said that the FBI, how much truth is in that, I don't know, but and when did they have it? And did they decide to run a parallel investigations? All those are unknowns. And how much did each part play? I have no idea.
Oh
What's going on?
oh my God, they're losing. All right, and Teresa, I believe they know who BG is. Alibis need to be discredited. They want all involved arrested at once.
Well, they can do, and that may be the case, and that there's several, and hopefully justice will come for every one of them.
And Teresita, I personally know a male who should have spent the rest of his life in prison for the number of images he had, sentenced to 3 years.
Oh yeah,
That's awful.
And then when they have repeat offenders that go out and do even more terrible crimes, and it's hard. You're not going to rehab that type of predator.
That is awful.
It's terrible. I mean, you can rehab them, but it doesn't have anything to do with prison.
And Sammy, random crime by a loner who lost his temper. Also impossible to solve without DNA.
Impossible. So we got the random ones.
And Jason, exploring, why would it cause law enforcement to say community is not in danger?
You know, I've watched that, and you see them when that's said, and you know, we have an unsolved early on that, you know, you have 2 victims died of a homicide, violent homicide, and then the community is not in danger. Makes no sense. And did he just misspeak and was under pressure and not used to, you know, because this was a crime that they didn't see? Was he just trying to keep the community calm? Don't know, but I give more credit to that more than likely is what he's trying to do. Just trying to keep the community calm. Just did it in a poor choice of words.
All right. And Susan, there are people that claim they have called the tip hotline and no one ever called them back or got back with them. Do you believe stories like this discourage people from calling in?
It could, and that's something they need to continuously go out there and do the PR work and say that we've got your tips, you called it in, we have them, and appreciate it, and we're working on them. We just don't have the personnel to follow up on the leads and contact everybody back with information. Hopefully, certain agencies learn that process, certain agencies don't.
And Carly, I'm happy to become a little part of such a wonderful family of true crime that cares a lot about our unsolved and missing people. And her little tag is Justice for Abby and Libby and Summer Wells.
Thank you. Thank you. We're glad that you are part of this community.
All right. And Anita, do you believe BG told the girls he was a cop?
It's very possible that if there was a ruse used, and would that have lured them into being able to be controlled so quickly? That is a very big possibility.
And Deb S., always have protection. I can't imagine going anywhere defenseless.
Or alone.
Me
Don't go
neither.
anywhere defenseless or alone.
Me neither. And Teresa, Steve, if they weren't so tunnel vision on Logan, you think they'd have been much closer by now?
You know, I'm sure that there was arguments even then when because they were following leads up, and all the investigators were working different leads, and the FBI agents and whoever part of the local that went after Ron Logan, that was just part of it, and that was the one that carried the most weight at the time. And we know in 2019 that they had changed publicly, but that investigation, when they came out with the 2019 pressure that they were going in a new direction, they had already changed directions prior to letting the community know. How long before? Don't know. I mean, they may have been working several months in that direction and had reached a point of that direction that, okay, we went this new direction and we're stuck. So now we're going in this new direction and we're going to tell the community. It's not that on that date of the release of this new direction that's the date they started. They had already started it prior to.
And Molly, I really wish we could see video of the KK interview. Watched Sherry FBI interview. Body language from everyone was really interesting. I love body language.
And she does.
That and eyes.
Yeah, she looks at the eyes.
Eyes are special, y'all. Eyes get you in trouble. All right, and thought criminal. Right, a lie can be just as good as a confession. See there?
Absolutely.
I love eyes.
I like lies just as much. I've been in a lot of places in front of a lot of juries where, no way in the world that the offender could ever take the stand. So we had the interviews on tape.
And Molly, I agree. Nothing has changed as far as violence against others, just different with 24/7 news, internet. Methods have changed. Violence has always been there. We just need more of it from tech today. We just see more of it from tech today.
Absolutely.
Purdue RN, not random.
Thank you there, Purdue.
Teresita, not random.
Goodness. Yeah, I'm seeing a trend here.
Jan, not random.
Either that or Mrs. Steve is not showing me the others.
No, And Molly, not random. Would I do that to you?
Yes.
Raggedy Susan, not random. And thought criminal. It would take confidence to take two people during the daylight in what could potentially be a populated area. Do you think this wasn't a first time? Or do you think confidence is fueled by substances and fantasy?
Well, you look at other types of offenders and, from BTK to Ted Bundy, that part of their fantasy and of a psychopath is that high risk and what that part played into their fantasies. So, yes, it can be. And just because that the motive may be certain other things, that not only does the motive, but just because you have a motive doesn't mean that the homicide that occurs during it can't also be part of another part of your deep fantasy, psychopath mindset. And so, they intermingle, they're mixed. And so all of that could be true.
Okay. Oh, this is a good one. You ready? Steve, you ever play good cop, bad cop? Is that real or made for movies?
It depends. Whenever you're in an interview, sometimes, you may go in there with certain things of that, and I've seen it where people did, but when you get in there, one question or the person may look at you and say something that totally changes the role that you may have went in there for, because you may look like a family member to them. You may sound like their father, or if a female investigator may sound like their mother, or someone that they like. So those roles can change very quickly. It just depends on that person you're interviewing. You may go in there with a set that I'm gonna, be the very stern person, but then it changes and the other person. But that's all part of the interview process that you'll see sometimes in law enforcement, that you can be surprised sometimes because, some of these offenders will open up to you at a drop of the hat just because you might remind them of someone like their grandfather or someone that's stern or someone they respect or feared. And they'll just open up to you instantly.
And Lauren, when FBI investigated Keegan Klein, is it possible the police were not privy to the information they had gathered on Keegan?
I don't, with task force and stuff, they should share, and I don't know if they shared everything, but generally on such a case as this, I believe they would have shared all that information.
And Carly, I enjoyed watching your and Chris's videos on the test on blood spatter and also how far and how long it takes for a weapon to sink when thrown from a distance.
Yes, I did a lot of work on that, and Chris does a lot of work, and I enjoy working with Chris. Extremely intelligent young man.
And Rosie targeted. And Casey, hopefully, if a weapon was recovered, how long will testing take?
And how many weapons were recovered? I mean, you're looking at a metropolitan area or one of the largest towns. It not really, largest in the world, but or that dense, but higher than a lot of areas in that part of the country. The how many other weapons and knives and devices might have been thrown off that bridge that may be totally unrelated to any one crime, but maybe related to another. And there's so many different tool marks and types of injuries and bruisings and characteristics of injuries that can be matched with certain types of weapons that it could take quite a while.
CJK, I heard on another channel from a guest I heard on another channel from a guest, was the possibility that the killer was watching Libby's house. He'd then know when she left and where she went. He'd know they got out of the park. Thoughts?
I mean, you're talking about, certain individuals and certain types of offenders have stalked their victims and knew their habits. And, BTK was really big on that he would stalk multiple victims. How much is speculation on that and what evidence? There's no evidence ever been released by law enforcement that says that that is what they have. I don't know. And it for me to respond, I think, are they just speculating? Unless they have some documentations, and then of course they are speculating.
And Paper Chaser, if this turns out to be a group in which one or more Kleins was involved, the serial killer theory starts to fade.
It does, unless you can have a serial offender it may not be a killer, but you could have a serial offender that could also have done homicides in the past, but that might be linked to the Keegan Klein. It'd be highly unlikely. The odds are against it, but I can see your point.
CJK, it's just something I'd never considered, being watched at home versus stalked via social media.
I'm telling you, we're in a different world. When I was a kid, we didn't even have phones. Okay.
Charlie, not random.
Thank
Too
you.
many coincidences.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate your support. It means a lot to us.
Okay, just got word from Never Silent that Kristen behind the crime door is in the hospital and could use some prayers.
Absolutely, guys.
Thanks for letting us know that.
And keep us updated. And everybody, most certainly give her as much support as you can. I enjoy going over there after our shows and watching it. And actually, that's where I was going to go tonight after the show.
Yeah.
Because I often do that with her. I like listening to her.
Bless her heart. Okay. And Shane, Keegan started saying he only had been to Delphi on a school trip years ago. He said he didn't know the girls. Now we have him in a Jeep the day
of.
Have you seen these tactics before?
And that is if that's truthful, what has been published out there of what he said. But also the information about that he searched in Delphi, 36 miles away from his home of a marathon station on the day of. Yes, different types of criminals when they're, and we know that he targeted Libby, who lived in this town. What other areas did he look up in this town? Was he planning on meeting them? And where was he going to meet them? And what day and time and what location and at what park and what trails link the different parks? Because in Delphi, that trail links from Riley Park. You can go all the way and walk it and get into the Moonon High Bridge area. And so all of this can be linked up, and, criminals all, some of them are well organized and they'll go out there and they'll do research, and some of them don't. But it appears that Kagan, during his catfishing, he was pretty thorough in some instances.
And Carly, Mr. Steve, if the two didn't commit the crime, do you think his account could have been hacked and that person could be the killer? What's your take?
That's a possibility, because, and I really hadn't given much thought to it being hacked up until recently, where I saw this other individual lay claim that he hacked it and gave information to the FBI. Of course, he says he didn't go in and change any information, but he just went in, checked, hacked his way into his account. So if it can be done once, it can be done more. What problems does that bring to the case? It will bring problems to the case on the prosecution then. On all, even the CSAM.
And CJK, there should be a one strike and you're out for sexual crimes against children. Any kind of abuse. We fail our kids daily in the justice system, in my humble opinion.
You are 100% correct. We
Absolutely.
fail our children so much.
And Susan, in the back of my mind, I bet this person has staged other crimes and such. Do you agree? A
Yeah.
blamer.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's never his fault. He's the victim of this. It wasn't his devices. Someone else. That wasn't me. I mean, you can read the transcripts and see that it wasn't him. He created the account, but it wasn't him.
No. And Eileen, do you think this is one of crime or killer has moved on?
Do you think this one crime of killer has moved on? No, I think that they're linked to this crime. And are there other crimes that he may also be linked to? Yes. But hopefully they have the information that can link him to this. And now whatever they found, hopefully they found something in the river that will bring it to an end.
And Kilt, do you ever watch the behavioral panel?
No, no, I haven't. I'll have to look that up. Behavioral panel. Huh.
And Shane, CSAM can take years to piece together. Hunting Warhead podcast took 5 years to bust largest online CP ring in 3 different countries. It's the toughest job for LA.
Oh yes, this internet, social media crimes and all this internet stuff, there's so much, and you got the dark web and everything where they can hide under all these layers of encryption. That absolutely, you are correct. It's a whole different world out there, and I only understand a very basic level of this social media platform. I'm still learning about YouTube.
I'm still learning about the Google machine.
Yeah.
All right. And CJK, eyes can tell the truth. How you're feeling, really happy, cold-hearted, indifferent, etc. You said that. Oh, yes. Eyes are the key. All right. And options 96. Too many moving parts to be random. BG is connected to KK in some way. LE needs to keep pushing and they will crack this case wide open.
I'm leaning your way heavily.
That's what we're hoping.
That's what we hope for.
And Sim, is it possible to know if a stun gun was used on them?
You know, it depends on what type. I've been hit with them numerous times.
Don't get me started on my mess.
You know, the only time I ever got injured from was from the taser, but it really wasn't that bad. It just burnt some spots on me. But the regular stun guns, they don't leave much of anything, so I don't know if it was or not. But I've probably been hit with them 50 times at least.
OSI or OSI. Being the good cop, people will start confessing to all kinds of stuff and tell you details sometimes.
Absolutely. You're correct.
And Shane, the only way it's possibly random is if BG/Keegan knew many teenagers were at the trails that day and the girls were at the wrong place at the right time for BG. Love to know how many kids AS knew.
And I'm sure that law enforcement knows that number, how many contacts he had. And whenever they did the research and took all the computers and all the contact information and all the leads that would have came in. We don't know all the leads that came in from this, as they went out and requested from the public's help. If you contacted us, they may have had another 500 to 5,000 people that may have called in and said, "Oh yes, I contacted Anthony Schatz."
And Joan, I had always thought it was lust sexual until the warrant of the FBI said no sign of struggle, and to me sounded like a hit if he slit the throats quickly, restrained together, neither ran.
Yeah, and we don't know, when they say that there was no sign of the struggle, what that really implies and what type of evidence they have of what was at the scene.
All right, and Carly, not random. Paula, not random. And digital. Steve, does GBI have a specialized forensic technology unit? If so, do you think that is the unit that did the peer review in the Delphi case?
They did when I retired. They had forensic technology, and there were certain processes. And whenever we sent computers in for the forensic evaluations or for processing, we had certain things that we were told, and you have manuals of how you secure it and what not to touch. Just like the FBI has a process, and you can go online and see their manual. But that could have been part of the review. Wouldn't surprise me.
Okay, and hold on one second. And Lauren, why would KK's lawyer allow him to confess to perhaps knowing details about the murder? Wouldn't that just further implicate him? If he tells on someone, would they really plea him?
These negotiated deals, and I'm not saying he even negotiated. I have no idea if he's even part of the information that is moving forward. Did he, or has he, or will he? All of that is negotiated out. That, people over the years in all different types of cases, when it gets down to the court date and we're facing multiple years and we're never going to see the light of day and how long we've been in jail, all those pressures can mount up on a person. And did they do another interview, and did the attorney say that, and did Kagan say that this is my opportunity, that I may have a chance? I don't know. But has that played parts in other people in other cases coming forward and trying to get where they could serve time and then get out? Yes. Don't know if that's the case with this one, though.
And Lorraine, I think the voices on, quote, guys, and, quote, down the hill are from the same person, but different times. Possible?
Law enforcement, several officers have said it's one person. One person said this. Even the I think the public information officer that was in this slideshow tonight, I think he also says it's from one person. And then Carter also alludes to that fact that it's one person that you see on the bridge.
In Avondale, Mama, not random. And let's see here. I'm going to shoot through here and just make sure I'm not talking about the rope that was used. All right. And Eileen, can Ellie know which platforms AS utilized?
Yeah, they, and they're, I didn't write them down, but there were several platforms that they mentioned. And when they made the plea, I'm sure that anyone else that called in may have opened up new avenues of investigations, because I know that there was mentioning of several platforms in some of the information of that has been gathered over the years, that it's just not the Facebook or whatever. There's numerous, from the yellow to Twitter to he had numerous accounts on many platforms under numerous names.
All right. And Susan, I go back and forth between random or not. I think Mr. Ives said it might be someone gets arrested for something one day and confesses to Delphi. And John Kelly and friends lean toward random.
I think in some of John Kelly's, he does, like I agree with you, leans towards that. And but in other cases, I don't know. I need to get in touch with Mr. Kelly. I appreciate that. I'll see if I can't get in contact with him.
And Molly, that is so sad.
Yep.
Georgia is losing 16-6 at halftime. So that is awful. We are done with the questions for tonight, but I have one ask, and that is if you have requested to join the private Facebook group to TCW, I need to know your Facebook names before I can do that. I've got a couple sitting out there that I don't recognize the names, and you're not followers on the regular True Crime Web Facebook page. So if you're a member, I think it's the Commanders, and you want to join the private Facebook group, send Steve a message, steve@truecrimeweb.com, and let me know your Facebook name so that I can go in there and hook you up. And please pray for Kristen. We've got several other folks in chat. Y'all can go back and look at them that are also ill. So add those to your prayer list too.
All right. Thank you. All right. But I appreciate everybody being here tonight. And if you have information on this case, most certainly forward it to law enforcement. And like I said, we're going to have something for all our members as we move forward in preparing for our travel that we're going to start mid-month and run up through the Midwest, and getting some input from everyone. And I thank everybody for being here tonight. I hope we've answered some questions, and hope that you're able to go out there and talk about it. And let's try to have some type of great impact on our communities. And y'all have a good night and stay safe out there. See you.
Bye, y'all.